been louder. I'll just read some introductory remarks for people who haven't been before. There's a couple in the back of the room. So can I welcome everyone to this meeting of the Cabinet Committee, Housing, on Wednesday the 23rd of July 2025 from the Walton Suite in Winchester Guildhall. Time's just gone 10 o'clock. I'm Councillor Mark Reach. I'm the chairman of this committee and the Cabinet member for Good Homes. The meeting will be live streamed on the Council's YouTube channel and the recording will be available after the meeting. Subtitles can be switched on and advice now to turn these on is set out online. Can everyone please make sure the mobile phones are on silent? Let's do that myself. And can I mind members and members of the public that when you speak, please use the microphone. Just press the button and it'll light up like this. In the unlikely event it's necessary to evacuate the building, the fire alarm will sound and follow the instructions given by our team. And welcome members of the public to the meeting this morning. And I'll invite you forward to come and sit here when it's time for you to make your contribution. So, turning to the agenda, do we have any apologies, please, Mr. Blakemore?
No apologies received. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
And do we have any disclosures of interest? Councillor Horrell.
Chair, just should it come up, my husband is a member of the Trinity Board. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? No. And we have no councillors registered to speak. So we move to agenda item number 4, which is public participation. I think who have we got first? Mr. Vincent. Or Mr. Tate. Mr. Tate, please come forward. That's fine. Mrs. Vincent, would you like to speak now? If just make yourself comfortable. So turning to the substantive agenda, I've turned pages 5 to 12 in the agenda pack, minutes of the previous meeting. I wasn't here, but could I ask if they are accepted as Councillor Clear? Oh,
agreed.
Oh, excellent. Very good. Thank you. Number 6 is chairperson's announcements. As I just said, this is my first time in the hot seat here. It's lovely to see everyone. We've got quite a full agenda today, so we'll try and get through it as quickly as possible. Since I've taken over, I've got around most officers. I've met most officers. I'm very sorry I haven't met Prashant, who we just met this morning, but I've been out meeting tenants. We've met with the TACT board. I've met with some of our tenants in town, and we are planning a visit further out into the district to see some of our homes out in the district later this summer. So Councillor Power will be coming your direction, I'm sure. Well, in fact, all the councillors on this side will be coming out to come and see our homes around the district. We move on to agenda item number 7, please, which is new homes update, which is from page 13 in your pack.
Thank you, Chair. Just bear with me while I join the meeting. I think that's all good. And I will just share my slides. Good, excellent, thank you. And apologies for my voice. I got a bit of a sniffle, and then cheering on the Lionesses last night seems to have completely had a bit of an effect. So sorry about that. I'll try my best. So good morning, everyone. I'm Caroline Egan. I'm the service lead for New Homes Delivery. I've prepared a set of slides to provide an update on new affordable housing delivery within the Winchester district. The slides follow a similar format to those I've presented at previous housing cabinets. And then at the end, I'll just provide a brief update on the work we're doing on the housing development strategy, which is in the process of being updated. So my first slide shows the projected figures for the delivery of new homes by the council up until 2032. We've now built, refurbished or acquired 314 homes since 2020, and that's the starting point on the graph you can see there. As a reminder, the forecast figures are based on a programme of affordable housing across the district that we RAG rate as a team, and we RAG them green, amber or red, and that's based on their current planning situation, commercial viability and needs data. So the blue line shows the highest number of units that could be delivered under our current programme, and that's if all green and amber schemes in the current programme get delivered, and that shows a total of over 1,100 units being delivered by 2032. But the orange line in the middle is perhaps a more likely scenario where all the opportunities we rank as green are delivered, but only 75% of those we rank as amber, and that shows a total of just over 1,000 being delivered by 2032, which is in line with our 1,000 homes target. And then the green line shows a more pessimistic view, where just 75% of our green schemes and 50% of our amber schemes are delivered, and that shows approximately 800 units being delivered. So there's been a few tweaks to the programme since we last met in February, but the graph shows a broadly similar new build profile as previously presented, and continues to demonstrate that 1,000 homes by 2032. The next slide, which some of you may also be familiar with, shows a breakdown of the types of scheme we intend to bring forward over the next 7 years. And again, that hasn't changed hugely since we last met. Bids from registered providers for Section 106 sites still hasn't really improved. So there's still an opportunity for us as a council to deliver a proportion of our programme via Section 106 opportunities. Members may be aware, for example, of the scheme that's now on site in Twyford, where we're acquiring 10 units via Section 106, and legal negotiations on the 146 units at Kingsbarton are almost concluded, with the first phase of those units hopefully almost ready for occupation. There are some further 106 opportunities in our programme, as you can see, and we feel it's important we continue to explore these. We want to prevent new build schemes from stalling due to a lack of registered provider interest, and it's obviously an opportunity for the council to add to its housing stock at the same time. However, we're also really keen to ensure we continue to focus on commission schemes on council-owned land. These schemes do take considerable officer resource. They can require the use of subsidy to make them viable, but we're continuing to push forward with schemes as long as they're economic to the HRA business plan and provide good value for money for the council. An example of one of these schemes is the Woodman Close scheme in Sparsholt, which has recently been out to tender. And we're in the process of evaluating those tenders which have now come in, and we'll be presenting the outcome of that as a final business case to Cabinet in October. Won't dwell on this slide too long, because you can just read the figures at your leisure, but this slide shows the total figures forecast to be delivered across the district over the next 7 years by both the council and registered providers. You can see from the totals at the bottom that the council is hoping to deliver about 1/3 of the total new affordable units planned in that period. The next slide shows our map of completed schemes, which are in green, those that are on site in a light blue, and those in the early stages in dark blue. And we also provide the main registered provider schemes that are forecast in yellow. And we've included a table to accompany the map. So hopefully you can see which units are which, and we've also added in the numbers of units being delivered by each scheme. We're waiting to see a TBC against some of the large schemes at Bearwood, North Whiteley, Kingsbarton and the Lakes. We're just waiting on confirmation of how many figures have been delivered at those, because this is a forecast table. So we just need to do that calculation. So we'll bring that to the November Housing Cabinet. And then this slide shows need across the district. This was something we were requested to do for last Cabinet. We haven't updated it, so this will be exactly the same as last time round. We've been told by our allocations team it's broadly right still, We feel it's appropriate to update this about once a year, just because need doesn't change hugely, and it is a little bit of it's quite a lot of work to update it. So if it's okay, we'll look to bring that forward as an update in the November Housing Cabinet, and then thereafter annually. And then finally, an update on the housing development strategy. So the current housing development strategy was adopted 5 years ago and covers the period for 2020 to 2021 to 2030. There's been some really significant changes within the market since then, and we felt it was important to update this strategy to reflect the current market and how we drive forward the provision of affordable housing, and that's both in terms of the councils but also registered providers and all across the district. So our strategy update is now well underway, supported by an external consultant, and we aim to have a completed first draft by the end of this month. The draft contains a section on rural strategy to ensure that that important area of affordable housing provision is recognised and addressed. Once the draft's completed, we'll be aiming to take it to public consultation in August and September. We'll then get feedback from that public consultation and do further work on the strategy, with our final target of Cabinet in November for that strategy to hopefully be adopted. And that will sit alongside the HRA budget options paper, which will be brought to the same Cabinet meeting, because we want to demonstrate that the strategy is both affordable and economic to the HRA. And that's all from me. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I guess I have an initial question, and I'm sure members will have some questions as well. On the second slide, the one just after the introduction, so the forecast, could you just say a little bit about what the main risks are towards delivery? What you think the headwinds are, please?
Sorry, bear with. I managed to close my presentation. So the second slide, the second slide with the graph.
The graphs. Yeah.
The graphs. Let me reshare so we can all look at it. This one here. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, the main risks. We rate them as green, amber, and red, and that's to do with, you know, viability, planning, etc. And those that are green, it's not that there are no risks, that the risks are significantly lower. I think more of the risk lies in the amber sites, because those are ones that we have assessed as amber, but it's difficult to know how things might change over time. So there's a risk around how we evaluate sites. We put a lot of windfall into our programme, so it's important to recognise that. There are some units that are considered windfall and amber, essentially. So if those, for some reason, don't come forward, that could be due to, say they're one of 6 acquisitions, that could be due to a slowing down in the market of private developer activity. Equally, it could be a lack of land. So finding land for affordable housing is very difficult. So I think the key issues really are market driven and commercial viability, and also whether there's land available to put those units on if they're more of a commission type scheme.
Thank you. Councillor Power.
Thank you, Chairman. I would expect to see 5 units in Byton on page 18, the distribution map. This is an exception site that has been approved by the parish council, and I understood it was currently in viability. Do you know more about this than I do?
Thank you. So that's a scheme. Is it being brought forward by a registered provider? Thank you. So on this, we have in yellow the registered provider schemes, and you're absolutely right. If there's one that we think, if it has planning consent, not yet. Okay, so I think that's probably why it hasn't made the list yet. There are many schemes that we could put on here, absolutely, and it's good to flag it. But I think it's probably not quite there for this list yet.
Councillor White.
So we have the number of units for the affordable housing, obviously, but I'm interested to know what type of affordable housing we're actually talking about, like what proportion of the numbers, for example, are the social rent, affordable rent, or shared ownership, where we could find that information.
Yeah, that's a good question. We do have a breakdown by tenure, but we just haven't included it in this presentation. So if we can easily do that in terms of our own schemes, because obviously we have that data. I can ask my team if we can do it for registered provider schemes as well, but I just don't quite know how simple that will be. But for the next housing cabinet, I could add that in as a breakdown, if that's helpful. Yeah, thank you.
Councillor Horrell.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the update, Caroline. Question regarding the first preference data from October 24. It's all very well receiving the data. What is the action that we're going to take as a result of knowing where those higher levels of demand exist?
Thank you. So if an opportunity comes forward for us, the very first thing we'll do is assess the need. So this map is useful in that sense, and obviously the data we have from our allocations team is helpful too. But I think where this map can be particularly helpful is to allow us to target areas as well. So our team are looking, for example, at whether we have land opportunities that we currently own in different parts of the district and whether they could be suitable to bring forward. It's very early stages at the moment. So we can aim our resources and work on the areas where there is the higher need, because that's obviously where we want to be targeting. So this map can help us in that sense.
Thank you. Councillor Clear.
Thank you, Chair. Caroline, could I just ask about Mells Lane in Wickham? I believe there's a option secured agreement to promote 32 hectares there that's been going on for quite a while. May I just ask you, how long is an option? Is it 5 years? And after those 5 years, can they carry on with it, please? Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to give you a very annoying answer. The option agreement can be essentially any length. It depends on what has been negotiated between the parties. And so obviously, as that's a private matter, I'm not going to be privy to that. Some options are 5 years, some options are 50 years. It can be hugely different depending on the situation and the site. I'm afraid that's not one I'm cited on.
Any further questions, Councillor Power?
Just one, Chairman, thank you. We are very aware of the risk of the increase in very small households as we look at the next 20 years. To what extent can you crystal ball gaze to make sure that the size of the housing, the size of the homes we are providing meets that predicted need? Thank you.
Well, the data that sits behind this map, for example, is broken down in terms of unit size. So we're always looking at, it's not just, there's, a 10 household need there. It's what are the sizes of those needs in those particular areas. So we can obviously on our own schemes make sure we're meeting that need. But we also have a housing enabling officer in my team who can provide feedback to private developers who are bringing forward Section 106 opportunities, and that we can attempt to influence the type of affordable housing that comes forward on those schemes as well.
Councillor Horrell.
Thank you, Chair. My question relates to the strategy, because when we moved to the idea that we would purchase properties, and given the location of many of those opportunities, they're more urban than rural. And the rural strategy was very much promised to us as a key element for those of us who are concerned that the distribution of homes is reasonable around the district. It isn't all just concentrated in the large developments. Where do we get the chance as councillors to comment? Is that at policy committee when that strategy comes forward, pre-submission to cabinet in November, or where will our intervention be? I see there's public consultation, but obviously many of us have some keen interest. And in that, could I also ask, what account are we taking on land that we own, have been gifted in some cases for housing development that we don't currently have on the list? You've mentioned land a couple of times this morning, and clearly at some point land is important, but if we've been gifted land, where is that in our thinking about the opportunity for development? Thank you.
Just on the members' contribution, I've got that written down as a question here. So it would be good to know, yeah, how, because we've said how the public can contribute, but obviously we'd like to hear from members as well. So I'd add my weight to that too.
Absolutely. I mean, in many ways, Chair, I'll be slightly guided by you as how you want to take that process through. We're aiming to complete the first draft of that strategy by the end of this month. Aiming to send it to you by this week. So once you've had a look, perhaps I think it's probably worthwhile us discussing how you want to do that. And we've got some time before November, so I'm not concerned about time. So there's plenty of time for whoever needs to look at it to look at it. In terms of your question about land being gifted, Councillor Horrell, I'd really welcome a discussion with you on that. I want to make sure that we're not missing anything. So perhaps I could email you after this and we can make sure that if you're aware of something and I'm not, that would be really helpful if that's okay.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So just on the members' contribution, Mr. Hendy's just reminded me that we've got there's a formal gateway at the HRA budget. I'd like to see if we can do something a bit informal beforehand as well, where we can just have a good conversation and hear from members. So I'll take that action. Councillor White?
It was the same question. I just wondered whether we would have an opportunity to look at the development strategy in this committee. That was the same question.
Councillor Cutler?
Yes, I have a question on Ravenswood at Knoll, which doesn't seem to be here, which I understood there was a significant number that the Wickham Community Land Trust were interested in as a registered provider, and the scheme was promoted by Councillor Horrell before many years ago, and I think planning permission was in 2019. I just wonder, when's this going to get off the ground?
So thank you. So Ravenswood isn't a site that we have any legal interest in, although obviously we have a strong interest as to what's going to happen. My understanding is that it's the developer who owns it is attempting to sell it to someone else, or the organisation who owns it, Homes England, is attempting to sell it to someone else, but that deal has currently stalled, and that is where we are. It's difficult for me to know how much I can say and not say, because sometimes I have conversations with people and they tell me things, and but all I know is that Homes England are trying to make it work, and we are very much in dialogue with them, as are the Community Land Trust. But it hasn't made too much progress over the last 6 months.
Councillor Horrell?
Thank you, Chair. Given the government have such a focus on new homes, and we have a desire to deliver more social or affordable homes in our district. Within the strategy, are you looking at the influx of money that we need to pursue? We've had historically a good relationship with Homes England. We've brought money in to augment schemes. What are we doing to show our worth, that we're worth giving the money to help develop, and also working with other organisations? So, the Community Land Trust type idea, other ways of bringing affordable homes to our district, and augmenting that finance so that we don't have to do everything, or we don't necessarily have to be in the pay of a developer to buy them. So are we looking at that in the strategy? And if not, could we, please? Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, no, that's very much in the strategy. We already do a lot. We meet with Homes England a lot. We're part of the Wayfarer Consortium, which is a really useful organisation to be part of, which is run by ABRI. We engage a lot with RPs, with the CLTs, etc. So we do a lot, and we're putting that into the strategy to make it really clear as to what we do, and how we do it. So hopefully, when you read that, you can then have a document that you can probably comment on in terms of what we're intending to do. But there are, for example, some smaller pots of money that are coming out from Homes England at the moment, like the Council House Building Support Fund. Mr. Hendy and I talked about that last week, for example, and we're looking to pull something together to try and apply to that. So we're trying to, obviously make the most of all the opportunities that are coming forward from Homes England, because there are a lot.
Thank you.
If there are no further members' questions, Mr. Tate, would you like to come and speak, please?
Thank you, Chair, for the opportunity to address Cabinet. Looking through the new homes update, I can see no mention of Dyson Drive. The planning application cost £86,638.19. The Abbots Barton framework cost another £30,783. So what's going to happen to the £117,500? Will it be written off, or will there be proposals coming forward? On the council's new homes page, there are 3 schemes listed in early stages. The Corner House, now binned. Woodman Close, started in 2018 with a liaison with the parish council, who've been supported. On the 25th of May 2023, some 5 years later, planning approval was granted. This scheme is undeliverable. It is too expensive. Take my word for it. Minden Way, again, it's been in, I've known about Minden Way for as long as I can remember. Where is it going? You've now added on Morgan's Yard, which is it's a section 106 site, which came out of the blue, an opportunity. I'm pleased to see that 10 homes in Twyford, but how do the affordable homes in the South Downs National Park impact on our numbers? Is there double counting? It's a great scheme, Alfred Holmes scheme. I've had some slight involvement with that. The National Park represents 40% of the district and is delivering effectively 0 houses. So how do we work with the National Park? And it was interesting looking at the demand in the areas. The National Park, by its very nature, has few settlements, but has a lot of land. If there are opportunities in the National Park, how can we reach the triggers to actually deliver those? And as some members will know, some of the my old ward, St Michael ward, half of that is the National Park, and so are some of the other wards. At what point, looking at the section 106 numbers, 146 houses for Carla, when will we know about the finances for that? Can the council now release that information so that people within the development field have a better understanding of how those mathematics work? Because that is I know that from my own working experience. And also, it'd be great to know the Morgan's Yard financial details. We need to release land and opportunities. Mrs. Egan is a breath of fresh air, so there's no criticism intended of the team. But as someone who is passionate about delivering affordable housing in this district, it cannot be that Sparsholt has taken 7 years to build nothing. And it was approved 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago. None of the planning conditions have been discharged. So we're a long way and the viability won't work. Sorry.
No, thank you. I mean, there's a few points in there. I guess your point about South Downs National Park, I was reading their planning policies, which are on their website, and they talk a very good game about viable communities in the national park. But then I'm afraid, if judge them on their execution, they are somewhat wanting. I don't represent, well, actually, I do have a bit of the national park in St Michael, and I shouldn't forget, I've got, a couple of 100 square metres of it in my ward. But indeed, we've got some properties in the national park as well. But councillors representing communities in the national park, large communities, this is a frustration I think we all share, and particularly when there's such an arithmetic process that goes on here, and I'm afraid they need to step up and do something about it. So I will be speaking to Councillor Pett, who is our representative, to make sure that he's feeding back and putting the pressure on as is appropriate, subject to members' views, of course. You raised some specific sites. Now, I don't think we can go into all of the detail about each of those sites. But again, I asked the question before about risk, and I think probably what we're talking about here is risk to deliverability. If there are comments you're happy to make, Ms. Egan, about that, I think that would be helpful, please.
Yes, I'm certainly happy to pick up on some of them. Woodman Close will come to Cabinet as a final business case in October, and that will need to be assessed by members at that point. It's difficult for me to say any more at this stage because we're in the middle of a tender exercise. You mentioned Morgan's Yard. That hasn't been through Cabinet yet. So once again, that's a negotiated position. I can't really release anything on it at the moment. It's 8 units within a larger scheme down in Waltham Chase. In terms of Kings Barton, obviously that has been through Cabinet. I recognise that the figures were exempt on that. Again, I'm afraid we're still in legal negotiations there, albeit hoping to conclude very soon. But equally, it's not necessarily, well, it's not up to me when things are made non-exempt, but that will be as part of our normal legal democratic processes. Perhaps just worth pointing out on the South Downs point, if I may, when I talked earlier about assessing different opportunities, we look at South Downs just as much as we look at other rural areas. You know, we did some work last year on some garage sites in South Downs, so we do always have those on the list. It's just on the longer list. It's just really important that everything is economic to the HRA, and some of those smaller sites can be difficult in that regard, and we just need to be careful as to what we progress with and spend our time doing. I hope that picked up the main ones.
Yes, thank you.
Please, happy to take any other questions.
No, thank you very much, and thank you, Mr. That's really helpful. I hope members of the public found that helpful as well. I think there was just one point on Councillor White about the breakdown of property type, and I think we're going to go in and have a look at that. I'm sure we've got that written down. So thank you for that. Enormously helpful as usual. We'll move on to agenda item number 8, which I think Ms. Burbidge to do.
Thank you, Chair. Just waiting for my presentation to look like a presentation. Great. I think we have it up. I think many of you have seen the slide before. It's just really an update. A lot of our progress thus far has been really focusing on SHF, so Social Housing Decarbonisation Fund. And we have updated the image to reflect some of the measures that we are introducing beyond the fabric measures that we'd originally proposed. The contents of the presentation, so I'll take you through the retrofit program update, what our properties and measures targets are, looking at the retrofit strategy, which we hope to present this year, what the status is, the proposed dates and the dependencies. And then just looking at all our programs and projects, where are they in terms of their current status and what our future programs look like. And then last, I'll end up with tenant engagement. These are our targets. Nothing has been delivered thus far because a lot of the first quarter is setting up all the contracts. So we have a number of contractors that we work with. A lot of last quarter has been ensuring that DESNZ, the Department of Energy Security and Net Zero, has all their documentation. This time round, they've required quite a lot more than previous waves. We are in a position to deliver shortly, and a lot of the SHF is based on energy assessments, which we see a target of 195. So that it aligns with what our delivery requirement is in terms of DESNZ requirement for this year. So we have 195 properties for SHF, and the energy assessments correlate with that. We just signed in the contract on the conservation areas, so we've got 13 windows to be replaced, and quite a few of those properties are sitting within the SHF. So we will see more measures in those properties other than just windows. And planned maintenance have just signed the contract as well for the windows at the bottom line for 100. So we should in the next quarter begin to see those numbers start being delivered. The retrofit strategy, this has been presented a couple of months ago in the retrofit board. It is something that we're developing, and it really looks at the journey between 2022 and 2030 and beyond, and just how does Winchester City Council achieve an EPC on all our council homes. There's an outline strategy that has been completed, and we're now developing the project proposal and the project plan. These are in draft, and we're looking to consult in the coming months before November, where we're looking to hopefully present it. I take on board what has been said about new build. Again, would be led by Councillor Reach in terms of you know, which milestones you'd like us to present that. And as I say, it's been drafted at the moment, so we should be in a position mid to end of August to begin to consult with those that are interested. And as suggested, we're looking to present that at the Cabinet in November. We were also discussing previously about a retrofit policy, and really this is, I mean, policy might be the incorrect word, it might just be seen as guidance. So once we've developed the strategy, are we in a position to be able to extend our plans in terms of planned maintenance and M&E repairs, mechanical and electrical repairs and response, where everybody addresses properties in the same way. So when we're changing a boiler or when we're coming to address a property that has damp and mold, is there guidance that is really led by the retrofit team in ensuring that we've got a good foundation and a good base in which to approach properties. So this is really based on the dependencies of the solar policy that has been passed in June, and we're developing a paragraph or part of the DCAN policy that will be adjusted to deal with retrofits. So where we've got tenants that are in need of support, what do we do in those cases? And again, we're hoping to develop that between November and January, and then perhaps with a presentation in the February Cabinet. What our programs, I've already spent quite a bit of time on the warm homes, SHF Wave 3. I feel we're in a good, strong place. Energy assessments have begun, and we will see delivery at the end of the summer. And the delivery really will be based on seeing those fabric improvements, and then the larger solar panels and air source heat pumps would follow. We have obviously the Swedish cottages. I've got a separate slide on that to discuss that. The conservation area windows, which I've discussed, and then we're looking at doing loft hatches in properties that we've completed already, where tenants have asked for better loft hatches to be replaced. So we're looking at that, and we're using that really as an opportunity to revisit the properties we've retrofitted. So how do we go back and make sure that we got it right? And really, I'm looking there to set the tone with contractors to make sure that they understand the quality we're looking for. And really exciting piece of work, we're beginning to look at blocks. So we begin to research them, understand them, see what all our data is on them, and begin to look at pilots that we can kind of unfold and discover what our strategy is for blocks, because obviously it's not a one size fits all. They will all need an individual approach, but our data is really important and investigation is important. We have an audit taking place, so we've got one of our team members going around sites where we've completed retrofit work to ensure that those are in good nick. Where they're not, we are looking at developing programs to make sure that they are in good place. And this will be a common thread throughout from now until 2030 and beyond, is do we get it right? Are we getting it right? Are we revisiting properties and making sure we do get it right? So I'm really strong about that point, and feel that it's necessary to keep that on the cards. And then finally, it's the development of the Winnell flats. So again, we're familiar with SHF Wave 3. Our measures are loft insulation, extract ventilation, cavity wall insulation, door undercuts, and then at the bottom, air source heat pumps on all the electric storage heaters, and solar panels with battery. As before, we've got 672 properties over 3 years, and those targets are set by the Department of Energy Security and Net Zero. As I've said, we've got the contractor appointed. The solar maintenance and use payment proposal, which was passed in June, was fundamental to this delivery. Energy assessments are in progress, and tenant engagement has begun. We had our first tenant engagement session last night. Thank you to Councillor Powell for attending. It was much appreciated. We do encourage councillors to please encourage residents to attend, because they're so vital. It is really the opportunity for residents to understand why we're doing it and what we're doing. And we're finding that the numbers are still lacking. So yes, it's a combination of ensuring that we get it right in terms of the right time and the right time to invite tenants. But also, I think if we could get some community-led support on that, that would be much appreciated. And as I said before, the documentation for the grant funding agreement is all in place. What we are finding is there are still some tenant refusals, and I'd like this time around to kind of reduce that as much as possible. So we are really looking to engage with tenants on a much more wider scale and far more often to mitigate against that risk. As I've explained, the maintenance and use payment was necessary, or the policy around that. We've started to speak to tenants about that policy, which is necessary, and we're working with comms with regards to that. And the final kind of hurdle is our data accuracy. So in some instances where we have more EPC C properties than D, which is not a bad thing. The Swedish cottages have been the team's Achilles heel, really. They, you know, we had a contractor who came through a framework, and unfortunately they've disappointed a couple of times. We're at the point of negotiating with them where properties will be left in their current state for us to ensure that they're then safe for the winter. So roofs will be sealed, windows will be sealed around. And then it's really a case of revising and replanning. So do we have this right? Is the strategy around the Swedish cottages right? And how do we relook at the specification to make sure that it works in terms of budgets, but it works also in terms of residents. Residents have been understanding. They've been through quite a lot. We appreciate that. We've tried to meet many of them in person. We continue to try and meet many of them in person to provide support. But it has been a difficult project, and it's one that we really would like to resolve early next year. The conservation windows single glaze, I think many of the residents are just welcome to receive the letters that we're going to be replacing their windows. We've had to split the delivery over 2 years. The contract has been appointed, surveys have been commenced, and we'll be delivering, but a lot of it ties in with the SHF. So where we're doing SHF work and windows, we just need to make sure that the windows don't push them to an EPC C, which makes them ineligible for the SHF. So this is the intended uplift, which you've seen before over the next 3 years. This only includes that which we're delivering with DESNZ and that which we're delivering in 2025. So obviously, as we pick up the blocks program and the pilots on the blocks, we should see a lot more of an impact on that 16%. The other programs which I've briefly discussed, the loft hatches, which includes remedial works. Blocks inception, which is research and selection. So we're looking at doing 5 pilot properties, and here we're going to choose properties with different construction types, different EPCs and different tenure. And it really is to try and trial it out and see which, you know, what methods work, what don't, what projects are going to need to take a bit longer, and which are the easy wins. We're also looking at interesting technologies that will help us explore blocks in a more overarching manner, as opposed to trying to intervene in each individual unit, which will become more difficult. And then, as I discussed, the order properties, again, just, you know, checking, reviewing and making sure we get it right. Let's make sure that the tenants are left with good properties where their fuel has decreased, and that we don't have any unintended outcomes. And then finally, the Winnell blocks, we've started to investigate this. The work around the Winnell blocks has been really good from the consultants we've appointed. We've come up with several options appraisals, which they are exploring at the moment. We've also had a management-led team internally where we are discussing the various items that need to take place on the Winnell block. So it is a joined-up process. It's not kind of retrofit in isolation. And once we have those options, we'll be presenting them. And we have started to talk about how do we engage with tenants in the most appropriate way and when is the right time for that. You've seen this map before. We've had to correct it. So it's an additional slide added today. Apologies for not adding it in originally. And in many of the wards, we basically have some work done. Obviously, the larger of it being the SHF Wave 3. And then in terms of tenant engagement, our resident liaison officer is yet to be recruited. Unfortunately, we haven't been able to retain the previous resident liaison officer. The Swedish cottages, as I say, we are taking that seriously. We are trying to meet residents in person, if not myself going out to site, one of my team members. The tenant engagement strategy for retrofit has been completed, as well as the quality impact assessment. We've started our tenant forums and we've invited councillors. We will continue to do so. The solar panel workshops were quite successful. We had a second one after our last meeting in June, and again, residents were pleased with the outcome and felt it was a fair proposal. And the website is an ongoing development which we plan to add to in the next month. And that's it for me. Thank you.
Thank you. That's really helpful. I mean, I guess my comment is, I think we all know this, it's about tenant engagement as much as we can. Certainly speaking to tenants in my ward, just sometimes, if not scepticism, then just a desire for more information about what it is we're trying to do and how that will help, and how that will help bills, reduce bills and whatever, to make it kind of tangible. Any questions from members, please? Councillor Power.
Thank you, Chairman. First of all, on the Swedish cottages, I think we need to know, it has been very difficult for residents. I think it would be useful to know how many tenants have been affected. I think where ward councillors have those tenants in their wards, it would be useful if they were informed about what the plan is, when we can expect to see resolution. And I'm sure some of us would be very happy to come with you to tenant engagements, because we like to be seen alongside officers and supporting officers. And I think we all know that tenants don't necessarily take it all in on one visit, and then they come and ask me in the co-op. So it would be very useful if we could be involved in that, and I'm volunteering myself. Secondly, where we're looking at blocks and flats, we do have quite a few leasehold owners, and I can see difficulties and resistance in that area, and I wondered how other authorities had handled that and whether we could learn from other places. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Powell. Absolutely, on the Swedish cottages, it has been very difficult, and I agree with you on that. Once we have developed a plan, I think, as I explained, there are 3 phases. So the first phase is really to remove the existing contractor and kind of come to an agreement with them, which we're kind of doing at the moment. The second phase, really, I see as doing the remedial works, that's urgent works to make properties safe. There are only 14 of the 21 that have been worked on, so the remaining have not been worked on. And certainly we continue to engage with tenants. So when we've engaged with them, we've explained the 3 phases of then the third phase, looking at the specification and just making sure we've got it right. But certainly when we begin to look at that, we will invite yourself for sure, and anyone else that's interested in coming along to those forums. Thank you for your offer. In terms of leaseholders, we are at the beginning of that journey, so it's a fair point to speak to other councils. We speak to Exeter and we've spoken to St Albans before. The approaches differ. I have been impressed with Exeter, so we'll continue those conversations. But at the moment, which is why we're choosing 5 pilots, we want to choose ones where we don't necessarily have leaseholders, where it will be an easy win, and ones that present a more difficulty. And the idea is to just tease out the challenges and opportunities in those pilots. But certainly we'll continue to engage with other councils on that. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Horrell.
Chair, thank you, and thank you for a very informative presentation. It keeps us all up to speed. Thank you for that. I have a couple of questions, though. One, to reinforce the point that Councillor Power made about leaseholders and how we get a strategy that will work for a whole block, so that when works are done, and it applies across a number of elements, how we manage our own tenants and leaseholders in that situation. And it is something that we're all going to have to tackle if we're going to get to the end of this in a positive way. One of my questions is about the retrofit strategy. How are we marrying this with the stock condition data that is still coming in, because we're not at that full point yet. Tenant profile data, because we don't have all of that, because all of those pieces of data need to align so that we can be as efficient as possible in terms of the retrofit strategy. So it would be good to understand how we're working to bring that together. The other thing, and I suppose it's slightly disappointing for me, I have asked several times, because as you know, I'm interested in the overall work for the housing team. But I do think you're not using your councillors in terms of the Swedish homes issues. We do get asked questions and then we're not briefed, so we can't answer eloquently and supportively for you. We have asked to be involved with tenants so that they can be encouraged to not see some of this as a barrier. And many of us are out on the ground in our wards a lot, and I think you could be using us more proactively. I have asked, I'm not getting a positive feedback, and I'm glad to hear you saying you would welcome it. I'm just saying you really do need to take us up on that offer. We are there to help you and to reassure our tenants who will sort of use us, as Councillor Power said, sort of, you know, at the shop, at the pub or whatever, in a different context than just perhaps a formal meeting. So I think it is something from a comms point of view that we really should be leveraging, because some of this has been quite traumatic for some people, and I think we need to be reassuring and make sure people understand that, you know, Winchester does know what it's doing and we will get it all right at the end. Thank you.
Thanks for your comment. And it's been a tricky project, I understand this. So I think the more help we can get, the better. On the other points, happy to respond, please.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor. I think from a leaseholder, I echo your thoughts, and really we need to understand who we're dealing with within each block and make sure that we get, and I think that's the reason for the pilot as well, is to make sure that we come up with the strategy. What are the commonalities that we're finding throughout? What are the common challenges, and let's create that strategy. We are working with tenant engagements on a larger housing front. So from that point of view, we are kind of collaborating internally to make sure that we are speaking to one another. And when we put forward a strategy, it's not just the retrofit team in isolation, it's across board. So that will continue, and that theme will then help us as we work already, as we are discussing on Winnell and with the other blocks. I must say, the teams are working a lot closer. So plan maintenance, when working on blocks, we're beginning to communicate and understand their challenges, because obviously they've had this for some time already. So they know the common issues that they face. In terms of the retrofit strategy, we are beginning to start to see where, because we do these energy assessments, and obviously we've got the stock condition reports, there is a marrying of the two that provides us with better data. So we're beginning to communicate on that. The retrofit strategy is quite a high level strategy in terms of how do we get to EPC C on all our properties. It doesn't necessarily go into the nitty-gritties. It does explain that, you know, there's a certain process of doing this, and certainly what happens is over the time, as the stock condition reports come in, it will start to inform the physical day-to-day details of the retrofit. So it's really important to understand the strategy is high level, but the day-to-day stock condition report and tenant profiling feeds in to our day-to-day projects. And that's, you know, that we're kind of conversing with colleagues on. And again, just yesterday, speaking about how we can work together, access each other's information a lot more easily, and make sure that we're collaborating wherever possible. And then in terms of inviting yourselves, I totally agree. I suppose my question to you is, how would you best be invited? You know, would you like time? Would you like us to engage with you on a one-to-one? How would you prefer? I'll give you a call, you know, what does that look like? Because I think we've been around this several times and you've said, please invite us. And I'm like, okay, great. But then we don't necessarily get around to it other than a formal email, please come to a forum. So yeah, if you put forward suggestions on how you'd like to be engaged to help us on that community feedback and those community feeders, if you like, I absolutely would welcome that. Thank you.
Thank you for that. And I think definitely, you know, it's helpful. Members know their wards best. So I think if well, whatever works, I'm sure we're adults here, we can just work something out. So please, whatever works. Councillor Becker.
Thank you. I actually had a very similar question in respect of the leaseholders, but in the context of the Winnell flats in particular, because again, you have a situation there, and the situation differs across the different blocks with the number of leaseholders, the level of engagement with those leaseholders. I know there are some issues with the leaseholders in those blocks. Is it possible, Frank, is it possible to do the block without the leasehold properties? Just to understand what the implications are if they say, no, I don't want a property upgraded.
So with regards to Winnell, obviously there are a number of other planned programs that need to happen on Winnell, which we need to tie in with. Some of it will be mandatory from a risk and health and safety point of view. Others will just be retrofit. From a retrofit point of view, it's understanding what our leases say on each of those leaseholders. And this is kind of what I was alluding to when I said we're looking at technology that allows you, for instance, if you put in solar, to channel that solar to specific units as opposed to everyone in the block. So technology has come along in order to ensure that we can get around where leaseholders aren't really keen for work to be done, don't necessarily want to contribute, and certainly from a we join very closely with planned maintenance on this, because obviously there's windows that need to be replaced, and that will be separate to retrofit. So it's just trying to find the balance and making sure that we're using the technologies available to make sure that we don't necessarily have to impose or get leaseholders to agree.
And on the engagement issue, similarly with the Winnell flats, please do invite us along. And there are, we have the Winnell Forum to which lots of leaseholders do attend. So there are other ways that we can drive that engagement, but just let us know and give us good notice.
Councillor White?
Yes, I just wanted to clarify where we are with the solar panel installations. So obviously we know that solar maintenance and use payment proposal was approved by Cabinet. I just wondered what the next steps were. Have we identified suitable properties, for example?
Thank you, Councillor White. So we've got a list of 1,500 properties, of which we need to select 672 over the next 3 years. As we do the energy assessments, properties begin to fall out of that. So the 1,500 reduces quite quickly to come to a set of properties that we'll work on. But this kind of takes time, because we have to go through the energy assessments, collate the data, speak to tenants, make sure they are agreeing with the work, and then moving forward. So at the moment, we've started the tenant engagement, we've started the energy assessments, and really we'll see within the next 2 months where we can begin to deliver, because we've looked at all of the properties that we can within the first 2 months and reduce them to ones that are definite in terms of the program. So we'll constantly see the fluctuation between loads of properties, not that many, loads of properties, until we get to a point where we know all the tenants that are wanting to do the work, and we know all the properties that are EPC-D and below. It's only because finer things like what light bulbs are being used can change that EPC, especially the borderline ones. So it really is a case of going through the motions, but we will see delivery, as I say, in the beginning of autumn at least.
Thank you. Councillor Cutler?
Yeah, I mean, mine's to a certain extent a repetition, but in terms of council engagement, similarly with the not just the Speedage cottages, but the Wave 3 properties, because the map, I'm not sure if the map actually, the dots relate to where within wards the houses are or not, and it would just be useful to know at least which properties are being considered for or have reached the stage you were just talking about, just so that we know and are prepared for engagement, even if and perhaps have some briefing just to know where we are. So sort of similar engagement process that we can help with on that.
Thank you, Councillor Cutler. I think it's really important to understand that we have a list, and that list is ever moving. So the reason why we've not identified specifically where exactly on the map is because just as of yesterday, we've lost 50 properties on our list of 1,500. So if we gave you those properties up front, it's likely that they might drop off. And as we approach the delivery, we get closer to a defined set of properties, but it's in a shorter time frame. So absolutely, we'll share that information, but it might not be in with loads of time in advance, because that property list changes quite a lot quickly. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Again, another enormously helpful presentation. I think the main thing to take away from that is member engagement. But as I say, we can just work out as adults the best way to do that. Whatever works for members, I think is good. So thank you for that. Really, really helpful. The next item on the agenda is feedback from the TACT board. The date, well, there was, I think, one on the 11th of June, but the primary one was the 15th of July. That was last week. And Lynn Mellish in the corner over there. What we should do in future is probably get you to come and talk, because it's a bit mad me recounting what you very helpfully summarised. But that's something we'll pick up offline and talk about in future. So we've had a couple of TAC meetings since I've taken over. The most recent one we had was an opportunity for members of the board to talk through the papers which are also in this agenda pack, which we'll get onto very shortly. I mean, please do stick your hand up if I'm misrepresenting your views. This is because I'm having to summarise here. I think the kind of overall positive feedback we had was around the structure of the housing improvement workshops. So I think tenants felt they worked quite well, and the facilitation opportunity to contribute, I think, was very good. And then there were a few areas for improvement, not primarily around the workshops themselves, but this is something we've heard repeatedly around the home choice system, and actually some of the information on there is just not very good. In the era of Rightmove, where you can go on and do a video tour of a house you might be interested in renting or buying, we ought to be able to do better. So that was primary feedback, which of course we've heard before, but is important. And also thinking about increasing the diversity of the participants. People are often these are often quite self-selecting groups of people, with the greatest respect, but there are people out there who perhaps might find it more difficult to participate in these workshops. So just challenging ourselves to think a bit harder about how we broaden the opportunities for people so that we actually reflect the communities that we're talking about here. On the policies themselves, I think the primary view was that they were clear, well laid out, and actually looked quite smart and professional, which is important. Again, areas for improvement were around the level of response we got, because that was relatively low. And again, look to everyone around this table to broaden engagement and to think about how we get people to contribute to these really important policies, or encourage people to do that. So any bright ideas, please, all well received. Some comments around the digital surveys being a bit tricky to navigate around, so that's something we'll take away and have a look at. And again, some of this sort of, I mean, it's a bit passé now, but this idea of kind of nudge theory, that when you're already engaging with people and talking to them, that's an opportunity to ask for feedback. So rather than having to set up something separate that people then have to go and contribute to, it's in the everyday interactions. Is there some way to harvest some feedback then as well? And again, a kind of summary of these policies, because they are, I think, necessarily quite long and wordy and verbose. A kind of at a glance summary, I think people thought would be very helpful. A bit like when, I don't know, you enter into a credit agreement, there is a summary of terms, same with insurance, any of these sort of things. Something that just makes them a bit more accessible would be good. And then around complaints handling, the feedback was with reference to similar authorities that our handling is good and is above average, and to try and see complaints as opportunities to learn rather than to be defensive, and not that I think we would be, but again to see them as, again, a rich source of data about how people are feeling, about how people feel they're being treated. Again, some technical things about call handling and the way we might do that a bit better. And then to talk about good practice and where we've done things well, and use case studies. We don't talk about, and Spur just gone, but when we're talking about retrofit, for example, that's a fantastic opportunity where if we have installed modern insulation and modern energy systems and people see their electricity bills go down, and I'm pretty convinced they'll go down a bit further than we think they will, just anecdotally from people who have installed modern, up-to-date heating and energy systems, but actually shouting about that. So we should have tenants banging on the door to say, I want this, we don't want things falling off the list. We want people saying, please, come to my house and do this next. So an opportunity to kind of celebrate where we've done well and build on that. And then finally, again, a sort of procedural point, but making sure that all the Byzantine and fairly incomprehensible to any human governance structures we have in this council all work properly, so that there's feedback between tact and scrutiny and this committee and council and cabinet, and just making sure we're all clear of how policies, procedures and feedback goes through each of those. And although it's a bit boring and bureaucratic, I'm absolutely convinced if we get that right, and if we get the reporting right at each stage, it makes officers' time easier. And then when we get into scrutiny committee, actually the data has already been produced and it's in the right format. So hopefully that was a fair summary of the board meeting. I said at the start that we're going to, later this summer, we're going to go out together and do a bit of a tour around the district and have a good pub lunch, hopefully some recommendations for members to, actually just to meet and talk to people and see the reality. So that will be something to look forward to. If I have forgotten anything, please shout, but I think hopefully that's a fair summary. All right, thank you. And thanks for coming along today. Do really appreciate it. Mr. Tate, I think you wanted to speak on this.
Thanks, Chair, for the opportunity to address Cabinet. I've clicked on the link on the web page, view background information on number 9. There's nothing there. I've looked on the council's website in housing improvement workshops and tact, and there was no board meeting scheduled for the 11th of June, so I couldn't do any research about this verbal report, and they don't publish minutes or an agenda anyway. Personally, I have a very strong interest in housing matters, and I try and attend every single council meeting where any housing issues are on the agenda. But I've only ever seen one tact board member at any of these meetings, other than the 2 elected members. Mrs. Mellish is the only person I've ever seen. TAC board members get paid £1,000. They go to 4 meetings a year of 2 hours. So in the cold light of day, even on my poor mental arithmetic, isn't that something like £125 an hour? And they don't go to any other meetings where I interact with them. I was previously involved with the old TACT organisation, and sadly I feel that the new structure isn't as effective at representing the views of tenants, leaseholders and shared equity owners as the existing TACT. I've had a very long association with the former TACT group, but I have to question whether the new structure is actually working. I'm involved with the Winchester Tara group, as you know. You kindly came to one of our meetings where we get officer support, which is great, and Monica Gill, who has formed that, is inspirational. But the new board, I can't see as a member of the public with an interest in housing is effective. Also, I've queried this a number of times in light of the fact that the chair of the board is the chair of the Cabinet Housing Committee. I think in terms of good governance, that's questionable. And I feel consideration should be given to the chair of the TACT board not to be an elected member and to be either one of the independent members or one of the TACT board, because, as Mr. Hendy will know, I actually applied for a role as one of the independent members. And I'm not questioning the process, but with your predecessor on that selection committee, if I was a conspiracy theorist, I would say there was not a chance that I would ever be selected to be an independent member, even though I actually have quite a lot of knowledge about housing matters. So I do think there needs to be some transparency. There's no agenda, there's no minutes. The website says virtually nothing about the role. I can't go to the workshop meeting because I don't live in council accommodation. So someone who's really interested in housing in Winchester and local authority owned housing is precluded from that. Although I'd like to feel I could make a positive contribution to those discussions. So I don't want to be pessimistic. And I said that the TACT board could be a really powerful driver for improvements to the way the council delivers its service to its tenants, and to encourage that engagement. And I think the fact that we've had one member of the board go to every single meeting I've been to speaks volumes in my books. But thank you for the opportunity to address this committee. Thank you.
And thank you, Mr. Day. No one could doubt your passion on this subject and others. So we do appreciate the feedback we get from you. And you know, the TACT board it's a relatively new constitution. It hasn't been going for too long. At the end of the last meeting, I kicked all the officers out. Sorry, with the greatest respect, just to sit down with the actual board themselves and to get some honest feedback about how it's going. And I think again, others can contribute, but I feel that the feedback was that it's positive and people feel like being listened to. My challenge back actually to the board is to be a bit more challenging of us. The standards that we expect of our contractors and of ourselves should be higher than generally. So it's a relatively new institution. In terms of attendance, it was that I feel like we've got a broad range of people. There is a vacancy coming up, so we'll be running a recruitment for that as well very soon. Unfortunately, it will be for a leaseholder, so it's not for an independent member, but I can absolutely assure you that if an independent member spot comes up, that everyone will be judged on their merits when they apply. So other than that, I mean, I mentioned that there was an error in the date of the agenda, and for that I can only apologise. But other than that, I think my view is it's working well. We're finding our feet. There's a process and there's learning and there's training to be done, but I'm confident it will work. I'm absolutely confident. And if it doesn't, I'm more than happy to come back and we can talk about doing something different. But for now, I'm confident and it's going in the right direction. So thank you. So we move on now to the standard part of the agenda, page 35 in your agenda pack, agenda item 10, which is the housing repairs, maintenance and disabled adaptations policies. This is quite a long document. Just to reassure people, this has been through multiple previous steps of governance, including economy housing policy on the 11th of February this year. So the purpose of this paper is to seek approval and to adopt the 4 housing repairs and maintenance policies as set out at page 36. So they are, to be clear, the disabled adaptations policy, housing repairs and maintenance policy, housing repairs recharge policy, managing damp and mould policy, and the second recommendation is to delegate to the corporate head of housing in consultation with the cabinet member to make minor amendments on the damp and mould policy so it's compliant with legislation. So this is to provide for what's commonly referred to as AWAB's law, to make sure that as the law changes that we move as quickly as possible to ensure that we are legally and morally compliant with the law, with legislation. Could I pass it over to Julie? Are you happy to do a brief introduction to this paper, and then we'll take questions from members? And of course, we have a couple of people who would like to speak.
I hope the paper is self-explanatory, really, but we were looking for the policies also support our re-procurement of our maintenance and compliance activities, and so it was important, and we all know how important policies and procedures are to underpin the work we do, guidance for our own officers, but also more importantly, really clear understanding between tenants and landlord responsibilities, and that tenants are involved in the policies and procedures that we write. It will be used as a foundation as part of the repairs and maintenance work, that it is compliant with laws, regulations, provide consistency and fairness of process, and mitigate risk and liability to improve customer communication and satisfaction levels.
I think probably what's most important to members here, because as I say, I think the report is quite self-explanatory, is that it is absolutely important that our tenants are involved in all over the policies and procedures. This is just a start. The 4 that we've got here, as I say, were initially updated, refreshed, to make sure that when we go out for tenders, that our bidders understand exactly what's expected of them in respect of our main areas. But we have also commissioned Pennington's, a independent organisation, to help us in through focus groups with teams, and also through support with tenants through, and Sarah will be able to help me with all the different methods that we're doing around our new policies and procedures that we're trying to introduce as part of a new way of working as well. And that's captured, I hope, in the tenant feedback. We've already made some amendments to the policies. We will still be continuing to look at them. They'll be monitored every 2 years, is it right? Be reviewed every 2 years. And again, the sort of driver for our policies and procedures, which we haven't been top of class for in the past, is to make sure that our tenants are central to the work that we're carrying out. And as Councillor Rich mentioned, we've been, and you'll see in the consultation area, that we have been through various committees, but also have carried out some robust consultation with tenants. I hope that's helpful. Don't know if Sarah wanted to add something around the consultation.
Thank you for that. That's helpful. I will just add, in terms of tenant feedback, because again, from TAC board, we've had some comments through as well, which we'll seek to address where we can. Primarily they relate to definitions and policy around neglect. So general neglect, willful neglect, untidy gardens. And it's the challenge back is to make sure that where people have, been willful or vandalistic or whatever, then absolutely that's completely unacceptable. But where we have more vulnerable tenants who've maybe found themselves in a difficult position where the garden's got on top of them, or maintenance has just generally got on top of them for all manner of reasons. It could be age, it could be mental health, it could be goodness knows what, physical health, that we make sure that we have a kind of human touch in this, and we recognise that, so that we aren't punishing people for falling into, difficult circumstances. Just reading through some of the additional comments as well. So there's a question around, naturally with policies, it is by definition almost a one size fits all, but within the policy, can we differentiate again to reflect individual tenant circumstances? Are there ways we could refer people to other services to help them put things right, rather than, again, whack them over the head? So if there's something that needs to be done, but actually finding the right person to do the work, handyman, handy person, can we do something that's more collaborative and helpful? So we'll feed that back as well. And then finally, just making sure that that where people are out, where we have people doing surveys for contractors or the like, that they aren't just following a tick box on their clipboard, and making sure that they are trying to take account of the individual circumstances of the property, the individuals, the people involved here. Now, this is of course tricky when you have contracts in play, but some way of, again, trying to inject a bit of pragmatism and humanity into the process. So again, hopefully, sorry, I'm putting words in your mouth again, hopefully that is a fair reflection of the comments on the recharge policy that came from TAC board. So I saw you writing them down. I'll leave those with you, and you have them separately as well. We'll take members' questions, and then we'll go to public participation. Councillor White.
So obviously we discussed these policies at Economy and Housing Committee, and you just said that the policies would be reviewed in 2 years, but at the committee we talked about members wanted to review after the first year what the impact of the policies would be once we'd adopted them, and I just wondered if that would be possible, and also how we would be measuring the effect of the policies or the impact as we start to adopt them.
Yes, yes, I think I've said in the paper that we will bring that, but that was a request and it was noted, and we'll certainly make sure that's on the forward plan to come back to you. And we'll be able to, how we'll be able to capture responses, etc. I'll pass over to Sarah.
Thank you for the question. Just for context, we're currently doing a bit of a refresh of our whole end-to-end process of policies and procedures. So this will absolutely align to what you're talking about. We want to ensure over time we can really show the difference in our policies and procedures, particularly through tenant voice and feedback. So they should start to have a different look and feel to maybe older ones that are still subject to review. But also, like you say, how are they being embedded and in practice? And a lot of, the feedback from the resident responses was around the disconnect really and misalignment with what we're setting out in our policy and procedures and actually what their experiences are. So we've got a new officer in my team who's really holding the ring on this and has already drafted a lot of a refresh, really comprehensive. It's going to our divisional management team in August just for sort of sign off operationally and everything. So we'll be able to provide an update and demonstrate, within the year and ongoing through cabinet how we're really, not just having them as documents, we're bringing them to life and importantly having that positive impact and outcomes. Thank you.
Councillor Horrell.
Thank you, Chair. I have a thought to put to the officer team in terms of tenant involvement in policy writing and drafting and development. We've run a readers panel for years in the housing team to make sure that the documents that went forward actually were people could comprehend. We used language that was normal, and that panel has helped us many a time to not make a huge error in how we communicated with our tenants. And I wondered, not necessarily that group, but a version of that in terms of actually looking at policies and actually being sort of a standing committee. We've thanked them a lot for what they've done in the readers panel in the past. They've been delighted to be part of it, and that way you can get a broader cross section, hopefully, of tenants, as Councillor Reach was thinking about, who might participate. So I put that to you. It's a simple thing that we do in terms of our comms, but that might be a further development. But Chair, I have one important question to ask about the policy, and apologies, I was not at the board meeting last week, but revolves around the specific elements in the disabled adaptations policy. And the element that worries me in that is that we have several references to under occupation, that we won't do certain works if the house or the property is under occupied. I fear that, a family house becomes, perhaps the older members of the family eventually, and there is under occupation, and then they become some way infirm and need additional adaptations. And they've been in the house for 20 years. I'm building a scenario, but I'm sure we could all think of tens of people like this who won't want to move, but do need the support. And so those references in this policy to under occupation where we won't help, what is our solution for those people with this policy? Because the human element, as Councillor Reach mentioned, I think will come into play. We will find that we have individuals who really do need that and have sort of lived with the under occupation, and we haven't. And how do we solve that if they do need that support? So I'm not sure how that has been addressed already, and what your views are. But I do feel we need to know what will be the reality when this policy comes into play in that particular policy. Thank you.
Thank you. I think it's a really good question. It's referring to page 51, 52 in the agenda. Are you happy to take that question now, or yeah? Thank you.
Thanks, Karen, Councillor Horrell. You know, there is a reality that we do have to make best use of our housing stock, as you would understand. And I think it's I hope it's clear in the policy, and if not, it's something we're going to have to revisit, is that it will be based on a case-to-case basis. It works in conjunction with our allocations policy, so we are able to prioritise moves if required. It wouldn't be a blanket no. There could be adaptations that would be quite suitable within, you know, I don't know, grab rails, things like that. But if it really is a property, it's not so much about under occupancy. Obviously, that's important to us because we do have to get that family housing back. It's also about making sure it's a long-term option for somebody and that they can manage and they can live independently. And it is often a better option for people to move. And sometimes that may be the result of the OT assessment. It will be done in conjunction with our occupational therapist and Hampshire County Council occupational therapist. But you know, in a reality, it may at some point be more suitable to move a tenant to a property rather than to carry out adaptations. It could be it's things like if you wanted to put, you might want to put a adapted bathroom, but actually there's steps to the house, or lots of things that they can't manage the stairs. So it is also hopefully an incentive to help tenants to move to a more suitable independent property where they will remain safe and have sort of other sort of support available to them as well. But it isn't a given that we would be able to do an adaptation at every property. But I hope that helps.
Councillor Power.
Thank you, Chairman. I've got some questions on the individual papers, but I'd first like to look at an overarching concern that I have. There is an apparent perception that tenants can take a day off work without any impact on their lives or income. And I have experienced a disturbing lack of competence in the rainwater goods department recently, where I think we've now had 7 or 8 appointments, some of which have been missed, and the matter, I don't think, is still resolved. So where is the recognition of the success criteria of all of these policies, which is how much we're paying out in missed appointment charges, how many housing complaints are we getting, and are our contractors actually competent? Do they know how to use a spirit level on a gutter? Is my current whinge, but you get the general drift. Thank you.
Yes, so it's a comment I made before. It's not exclusively tact board, but it's when we had a plumbing disaster at home, living in a Victorian terrace. These things happen all the time, and so got insurance against this because it'd be very expensive and very costly. And I rang the insurance company. It was a Sunday night. I said, "Look, water's gone off. This is a major problem." I didn't then expect to have to chase the insurance company to chase the contractor to make sure they had the right part. You know, that's now their problem. So I talked before, and Councillor Horrell reiterated that point about the human side of this, but actually there are some pretty kind of hard deliverables that people need to do, which is make sure that first time fixes are done wherever possible. And we had a good conversation about KPIs that were in the new contract, and so this is all very bureaucratic and the like, but the point is making sure we get those incentives right up front to avoid, I know the case you're referring to avoid precisely that sort of slapdash approach on occasion. Do you mind, do you want to make some comments on
that? We considering the amount of repairs that we do on a monthly basis, the actual complaint rate is quite low. It's obviously one of the most important aspects for a tenant is that if they've made an appointment for a contractor to come, that they should come. We acknowledge that there are communication issues there, that sometimes we're not aware they've not arrived, and we're working on that. We do have, we acknowledge that we have quite an old-fashioned housing hub, and that's certainly part of our new restructure work that we've done quite recently. I mean, it's covered in the next paper, but I'm really delighted to say that we have an amazing new property services team now. We have a much more modernised focus on what we're trying to do with our work. Our re-procurement work of our maintenance and repair strategy will certainly look at that element of it. We want to be able to work closely with contractors, so that I know feedback I've had from tenants. I had it at TACT, is actually they'd really like to contact the contractor directly. They don't want the middle person. They really want to be able to arrange an appointment if they need to cancel it, to have that two-way conversation. I'm afraid our IT systems are still rather dated and we're not quite able to do that. So we are, you know, our aim with the new re-procurement strategy is to really modernise this system and make it a much better service for tenants. We do have in our compensation policy reimbursement for people that have taken out time off work and the tenant hasn't arrived, the contractor hasn't arrived. I don't know of any, maybe one or two occurrences where we've actually paid out that compensation. So again, whether people don't know about it and don't contact us, but I'm quite confident that complaints are quite low around repair. It's the most complaints we get, but compared to what we do, that they're quite low level. But we, as I say, we are working really hard to modernise systems and provide a much better direct service for our contractors.
I think, Chairman, that it's the occasional case where we really are let down by everybody that gets the attention of councillors. I think it would reassure the public if we could publish that data on a regular basis, so that people can see that most of the time we get it right and hopefully see some improvement. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. I was just going to say we do, but if you're not aware, then we need to make sure it's published more clearly. It's all over the place, but it's clearly not up front and centre. So we'll see about presentation. So.
Thank you for the comments and questions. So a couple of things. Absolutely, we need to triangulate all of our information, look at our learning from complaints. So that is a continuous journey. It's going to be a real focus for the next year. We have launched quite a soft launch, but we're about to go out with more communications and resident complaint scrutiny panel. So that work will really drive, because whilst we may sit as officers and do it, we want to ensure that tenants are reviewing that, scrutinising it. Absolutely talks to Councillor Horrell's comments as well around the content, the accessibility, so the readers panel. And on that point, Councillor Horrell, we've actually got tomorrow evening our first in-person policy resident engagement workshop with them to look at how we co-produce. So these 4 policies that we're talking to today, because they're very much needed for the repairs and maintenance, they're not in the cycle of how we intend to work and how we want to work more collaboratively. Yes, we've done consultation and everything, but our aspirations and our plans around our tenant and resident engagement is much more than that. It's getting in early, again, like yourselves as well, ensuring member engagement. So that starts in person. The digital survey approach was launched for those policies. So it's a brand new approach. We know that doesn't capture everyone. So we're doing that, and we're looking at a refresh of our readers panel, perhaps calling it something like armchair reviewers, where people can, if they have an interest and would like, you know, like Mr. Tate as well, he's obviously very involved in councillor, so people can engage with us in the channel they wish to and how they want to, whether that's in person or online. So there is more to come, and I'm confident that that will start to develop. We also had some internal conversations yesterday on the time off work. Our team looks at complaints and everything and analysis, and more to do there, and share case studies and learning. And we would like to, as a service, we need to address our absolute immediate priorities, but the aspiration and hope is having more joint up approaches for appointment booking, and maybe getting to a point where there's an opportunity for more of a property MOT. I can't give a timescale commitment today, but those conversations are absolutely happening, and Mr. Hendy and Mrs. Knight were part of those conversations with officers. So we are seeking to respond, but thank you.
Thanks, Ms. Hobbs. Councillor Becker.
Thank you. Back to the adaptations policy. How does this policy work where someone has a disability that is continually changing? So we've had some situations recently, I know, where we've had residents with motor neuron disease, which progresses, in some cases can progress very quickly, and the needs that that person is expecting to have met change quickly, sadly, as they deteriorate. But you can see that they will need those adaptations made, if not now, but in 6 months' time, they will need those adaptations. How does this policy address that sort of situation?
Answer that, Chair. It's the same as the approach to disabled facilities grants applications. The occupational therapist should recommend adaptations that are for the future, taking into consideration future conditions if there's a level of deterioration. So it's not the here now, it's an adaptation that covers the future situation as well.
Councillor Horrell?
Chair, I think there's a general point here that we've heard about today, the example of the missed appointments, and I'm not sure as a team we're doing enough to develop case studies, both positive and negative for ourselves. Positively to sell what we're doing and tell everyone as a tenant, you know, why you should have solar panels and why it's a good idea, and to really engage in that and do more of that. Be more proactive and use different media channels to actually communicate that. But for ourselves, when we have a really tricky problem and it takes months to resolve, to look at that and learn, all of us, because we learn as councillors as to what those hurdles are, and hopefully we can look to see whether our procedures and policies are helping or hindering us. And if in that sort of learning we find out it's actually only 1 in 1,000, it's visible and we're being noisy about it, but we put it in context. But we always say we'll do these things and it never gets to the top of the list. And I actually think both for learning but also for good comms, we should be doing some of that across all sorts of pieces of our work, not just here on the policies, to better help people to understand how we do business and what we're striving for. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm sure Councillor Power will provide feedback on the case we've been discussing, and we can do a lessons learned on that if it's helpful. You know, so. Councillor Power.
Chairman, question on the HRA. By the way, on the previous debate, could we just remind ourselves that people would far rather be a council tenant than a registered provider's tenant? So we are doing a pretty good job compared to some. And let's not forget that. In the HRA adaptations, there are a couple of references to the availability of occupational therapists. I have heard of difficulties in accessing Hampshire County Council OTs. And how many do we have of our own? And is that a common problem? Thank you.
We have one in-house occupational therapist on the HRA service, and we have one on the general fund, but that's dealing with disabled facility grants. Yes, as a landlord, our referrals, our tenants need to make a referral directly to Hampshire County Council's OT system, and that is very understaffed, I understand, at the moment, and that has caused delays. We are able to pick up some of the cases, but on the whole, that continues to be quite a delay for us as a landlord, and that's something that we're working with Hampshire County Council around.
Councillor Clear.
Thank you, Chair. I just want for me to responsive repairs. I take it this means day-to-day repairs to or around council housing properties, and so to ensure the safety of our tenants. And programmed repairs, I take it these are far more complex, obviously. And with the disabled adaptations policy, I take it, and I'm sure you do, it takes in everything from sight, hearing, speech, everything you can think of, to injury or impairment. I just want to make sure. Thank you.
Yes, it does. It also covers people with mental health issues, autism, all sorts of things. The adaptions policy would cover. But really, as I say, as a landlord, it's on a recommendation from an occupational therapist, whether that's in-house or through the Hampshire County Council system. And we can make minor adaptions and we can do larger adaptions, but we do have a limit on the fund of 6,000 grant for HRA adaptions. Did that cover everything? I'm not sure.
Please, yeah.
I have a couple of questions, Chairman, on the voted papers. Firstly, on the repairs, there's a reference to the contractor's code of conduct. What are the consequences if that is breached? And on the damp and mould, you know that's my passion. Have we looked at lagging cold water feed pipes? We seem to get quite a lot of mould on those. Thank you.
I'm not aware of whether we are lagging cold pipes, but I'm sure I can find out. As I say, really, I suppose I'm being a bit repetitive, but I understand that the service, you know, and our regulatory judgment clearly underlines that our, you know, property services has been failing in the past. And a lot of the work that we're trying to do now with our re-procurement, I'm hoping will, as I say, will provide us with a much more modernised service, and we will be in a position, I think, where we have officers now that can robustly contract manage, and that's clearly been a failure in the past. We recognise it. It's a very public failure that I've had to live with, and I think now, you know, we are looking at a very positive turn of events within property services, as I say, some very experienced officers. So I'm hoping, you know, that's going to dramatically improve. Thank you.
And we'll take final members' questions. Sorry, Councillor. We'll take the final members' question from Councillor Cutler, and then we'll.
Thank you, Chair. Under the list of rechargeable repairs, which it does say it's not exhaustive, but there's just one in there that seems to be quite subjective, which is untidy gardens. Does that refer to effectively rubbish in gardens and gardens being untidy, or I mean, if someone just chose to rewire their gardens, that could be regarded as untidy. You know, it's a very subjective element of things. So I just wonder what the criteria around untidy gardens is.
Yes, that's a very relevant question, because that has been fed back by the TAP board. I understand. I wasn't able to attend, and I think Lynn, you may have mentioned that as well around. It will be done on a case-to-case basis, and there will be exceptional circumstances, although there will be tenants, as TACT and other tenants have highlighted, that are vulnerable, and that maybe that the first instance is for us to look at how we can assist with that. But we're talking really around what we found a lot is that when somebody leaves a property, then they've left it in a condition that certainly wasn't as it was allocated, and they are the type of big where they've really been destructive or left lots and lots of rubbish that we need to clear, etc. And that's at a cost to obviously other tenants. So we are keen to make sure that those that haven't looked after their property are recharged, but it's unlikely to be for anything that you've described there. We would work with people there if there's too much, I don't know, play kit in the area or lots of paint pots. We could help with that, but if it's quite probably more going to apply at voids, I would say.
Thank you. We'll move on to public participation. If we go alphabetically, I think, Mr. Tate, do you go first? Or are you going to be chivalrous and invite Ms. Vincent to go first?
Thank you, Chair, for the opportunity to address Cabinet Housing again. I've read through the various supporting papers and hope this change of emphasis will enable the Council to deliver better services to tenants. I note that the changes in the service will lead to resident-centric ethos, with and for them rather than to them. But what does this actually mean? And surely, in my time as a councillor and with an interest in housing, I don't believe it's ever been the attitude to them. I think it's actually always been with and for them. But what always surprises me, and Mrs. Knight has actually already mentioned that, is so many of the issues that I come across is where it's a failure with technology. And the number of times, the value of the Winchester Tara meetings is that we get contractors coming to those meetings. And I've learned more from those meetings, I think, than I did in my various positions on the council. And I'm going slightly off piece here, but the systems aren't integrated. So the tenant phones through an issue, this is primarily on repairs, gives a lot of information which is recorded. The contractor is told it's a leaking tap and an address, and the frustration that they clearly have. And that then means that they don't go with the appropriate tools, equipment, and the appropriate items to repair the defective piece of equipment. So, you know, I have read through the policies, and if I had more time, I would love to make comments on a lot of those things, particularly disabled adaptations and gardens which are in disrepair. But I think that the emphasis of what I'm saying is I do think there is a technology issue between the council systems. I've never actually seen Orchard I've never seen it in practical terms. But where that information is then given over to the contractors, and the contractors at the moment, I think, are really good. That's the experience I've got from what tenants are saying when they're given the right information. So Chair, I'm not dealing so much with the policies, but I think to achieve what the policies are aspiring to, there may be some quite major but practical elements of the way the council housing functions and engages with its contractors and its tenants, which may not necessarily be an easy win, but a very significant and important win. Thank you.
Thank you for that. It's something that I think I know we are seeking to address through the procurement of the new contract, which I took to Cabinet, goodness me, 2 or 3 months ago now. I can't remember this precise date. But I agree, we've got to get the technology right. It's 2025, we can do better. And that will hopefully solve a number of the problems that we've heard about this morning, of repairs being done first time and the like. Anything else you'd like to add, Ms Hobbs?
Yeah, just wanted to let everyone know that we have just launched resident post-repair satisfaction surveys. So we used to have letters. It's in a test and learn phase, so it will officially start to report on it in Q2, and we've had some resident feedback on the survey being short and to the point, which is good because we want it to be as real time. We have got some constraints, as you've highlighted, in our system, so we're doing it through digital to start with. Again, we know and recognise we need to not exclude non-digital, but it's a starting point. So that information will feed directly back into contract meetings, and directly the repairs customer hub manager is seeing in real time all of the responses coming through and picking up anything that needs addressing. So we hope, whilst we're working with the other constraints, that will provide some really positive feedback and we can seek to address it much more efficiently. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms Vincent, would you like to come and address the meeting, please? So you've seen how it's done. We'll have 3 minutes to make your comments, and Dave will start the timer shortly.
Hello. I have a question about the disabled access. I've got 2 other items as well. Winchester City Council's legal obligations, are they in line with the Equality Act 2010 for not only residents, tenants, but also for visiting disabled members of the public and communal garden areas to ensure Winchester City Council disabled access policy commitment is applied consistently and fairly and does not disadvantage the disabled members of the public accessing residential communal areas presently and in the future?
Well, I can certainly assure you that we will be in line with the Equalities Act, definitely, because by act of law we will be. In terms of actually accessing communal areas, I guess we've got so many of them. Who would like to field this? Mr. Knight? Yep.
Yes, we are adaptions and aids budget is part of the HRA budget, so that's obviously tenant income, and so it would only apply to tenants of Winchester City Council.
Does that answer your question? Please feel free to restate it if if there's how can we help?
I'm a bit confused because I am totally aware of disadvantages in creating disabled areas for access from residential community garden areas for members of the public. So the fact that it's been funded I don't see the relevance with that, with the actual work being that hasn't been undertaken.
Mr. Hendy has.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I suppose it would be helpful to understand whether we're talking about communal areas in blocks which clearly are not open to the general public. So we wouldn't owe a duty to the general public. We would owe a duty to the people living there to make sure they are accessible, as Mrs. Knight said. We wouldn't expect the general public to be accessing communal gardens around our blocks. That just wouldn't be the case.
The second thing I'd like to bring up is the Winchester City Council's obligations, which states to provide safe and secure environments in recognition of its tenants, not leaseholders. Winchester City Council states to create an environment where abuse is less likely to occur, to protect and minimise intrusion on Winchester City Council's private property, public spaces and communal shared areas. Taking this into account, what is Winchester City Council's policy on leaseholders in installation and use of video doorbells and CCTV equipment that monitors and records footage of activities on Winchester City Council's private property, public spaces and communal shared areas. Areas of which, for your information, where such use would be outside the boundaries of a leaseholder's property and in violation of the GDPR regulations, Data Protection Law 2018, the ICO regulations, and also in breach of some clauses of the Human Rights Act 2010.
Thank you. So again, in answer to that question, our position will be exactly in line with the law. In particular with video doorbells, walk down any street, doesn't matter if it's Winchester City Council property, owner occupiers. I don't know, a huge number of properties now have these doorbells. It's incumbent upon the owners to make sure they are fully compliant with the law. If there's lots of guidance online set out about the process to follow and to make sure that the use of these doorbells is consistent. The reality is, if we have a situation involving neighbourly disputes, whether it's our tenants, whether it's in private sector or wherever, there is the Information Commissioner's Office. It's their job to enforce precisely these sorts of disputes around GDPR. And it's not something that I think we would normally get involved with. We would expect people to act fairly, reasonably, and absolutely in line with the law. So it's not something that we would directly get involved with. We would expect people to behave neighbourly and resolve it through, if not possible, resolve it through the law as it stands.
Lastly, the cycle storage. I'd like to put forward to inspire more people to consider cycling as a viable enjoyment mode of alternative transportation for journeys to shops, schools, work, or simply recreational, to further promote green spaces, health and economical benefits by creating an infrastructure for cycling to be more appealing to residents, also to encourage drivers to cycle. So what is Winchester City Council's policy on providing storage for cyclists in residential properties, i.e. providing secure, readily accessible cycling parking facilities for residents at home, at work, or places of popular destinations?
So I think absolutely council's policy is to encourage walking and cycling wherever possible. We always forget that these are actually the key transport modes that connect people to where they want to go. You've set out some of those just now. At a meeting of the Tara board, which Mr. Tate was at, and the officers here in Chesil Lodge a couple of months ago, we heard some really good, Councillor Horrell was there as well, of course, we heard some really good feedback from residents of some unused space, which I think was in Winnell, if I remember correctly, where that would be ideal to turn into cycle storage. So we asked officers to go away and look at this. So where we have unused space, and it's a no-brainer, let's just absolutely open that up if it's safe to do so for people to store their bikes. If not, we need to look at more broadly, and that's a decision we can certainly talk to TAC Board and Tara about in terms of investment in our spaces around our property to encourage, well, to provide safe storage and secure storage for bikes. The other end of the other side of this as well is making sure that the places people go to also have secure places to store their bikes. So we've installed some secure storage in Middlebrook Street car park, for example. We have to go a lot further. We know that the demand for people to park their bikes, particularly in the centre of town here in Winchester, and I know it's the same out in the wider district, the demand is there, but we're not always meeting that. So wherever we can, we will look to invest in secure parking. So absolutely, we would encourage cycling wherever we can, but particularly on our properties, which I guess is in the purview of this committee, we are looking to see where there are spaces that are unused, and if not, if there are areas that we could convert quickly and easily for cycle storage. Thank you very much. So we move to the recommendations, assuming we don't need to do any debate on this. Oh, we did. Councillor Horrell.
Chair, across all of the policies today, we talk about reporting and measuring how we're doing, looking over time. My thought is that we should, as a Cabinet Committee, have raised here on a regular basis anything that triggers above what would be deemed normal practice. So it's clear that the data is going to various officer teams, but I think it would be helpful for us to understand as these policies evolve, building on what one of the other councillors had said earlier, that we have that understanding of the outcomes over time, and we can then have that triangulation of the data if that's possible. Thank you.
Yeah, and I think there's a few different ways in which we can do that. I think we have TAC Board in particular is quite helpful. We have our regular meetings, well, not quite one-to-one because Councillor White is there as well. So, and further to the conversation we had earlier, if there are specific ways that you would like to engage, I mean, please just drop officers a note, drop me a note, and we'll see what we can do. Councillor Powell?
I think this comes back to the earlier point about using your councillors and making your life easier as officers. If I can point to the overall statistics and say, look, we're doing a really good job overall. You've got, in your case, it didn't work and we're going to work on that. But overall, we are doing a good job and we really want to back you up and just deal with the exceptions, not the everyday. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Clear?
Just to say a big thank you. And I agree with Councillor Power. You are doing a good job, but we need to have more engagement, I think, with you and our tenants, please. Thank you.
So, Cabinet members, recommendations are at page 36, I think. Yes, page 36. So the recommendations are that the Cabinet Committee Housing is asked that we approve and adopt the 4 housing repairs and maintenance policies. That's the disabled adaptations policy, housing repairs and maintenance policy, housing repairs recharge policy, and managing damp and mould policy. Is that agreed? Thank you. And then the second recommendation is that the Cabinet Committee Housing delegate to the Corporate Head of Housing in consultation with the Cabinet Member for Good Homes to make any minor amendments to the damp and mould policy so it's compliant with legislation from October 2025. Is that agreed? Thank you very much. So we now move on to agenda item number 11, which is the Social Housing Regulation Consumer Standard Improvement Plan, which is page 151 in your agenda packs. Mr. Knight, are you happy to do a brief introduction to this paper? Or Mr. Hendy is going to do a brief introduction to this paper. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Chair. By way of introduction, I'm just going to pick up some of the other meetings that this paper has travelled through before it comes to you, because that may help members in terms of questions and comments. We presented this paper to Economy and Housing Policy. Main questions that came out of that were around the priority of the works that had been identified, and we were able to reassure councillors that the priority of the works in terms of improvement plan and compliance work that was based on the independent advice we received when the assessment against consumer standards was undertaken some time ago. There were questions about the budget for the works, and the paper in front of you gives you information on the budget that was made available in the last financial year, but also carried forward to this financial year for works in relation to compliance work and also the stock condition survey. There are questions around the process for updating policies and procedures, and we intend to bring the policy and procedure to your November meeting. They're being worked on at the moment. We have drafts of those. There are questions about the stock condition survey, and there's been minor slippage on the stock condition survey. We expect that to begin at the end of this month with a pilot of 283 or 38. 38, got the numbers the wrong way around. 238 properties that we piloted into this month to inform the ongoing stock condition survey. There's a question around asbestos, which is obviously an important issue, and what was the risk in terms of asbestos surveys identifying the requirement for additional works. And we're able to assure councillors that so far the assessment of asbestos in communal areas that has taken place, we haven't come across the need for additional works from that. We also took the paper to the tax board. Two key recommendations for the tax board. They wanted regular updates from the monthly meetings that we have with the social housing regulator, and instantly picked up something that councillors of this committee have raised today. They wanted us to improve our communications to tenants. You'll remember we wrote to every tenant on the back of the regulatory judgment to reassure them that property was safe and that we were committed to do the work to make sure we can achieve the consumer standards. They think we should be using social media to promote some of the good stories and progress that's being made to reassure customers that we're progressing our improvement plans as we should be. The other thing to say is, and I know some of the members on this committee will have attended the training provided by Pennington Choices on the 16th of July around health and safety and compliance. Hopefully that will give members the knowledge to challenge and hold us to account on this very important area. We've had two meetings with the social housing regulator so far. The last one was yesterday, and I think it's fair to say they regard the progress that's been made as very positive, which is very reassuring for us and hopefully for you too. The last thing I want to say is since the drafting of the risk report, there has been significant progress. Some of the information provided in this report is as of the end of May, beginning of June, and we can update you on the current performance. To give you an example, we have completed all the fire risk assessments now, and there are only 3 high risk remedial actions outstanding at the moment, but it's all in train being dealt with. I've already mentioned the stock condition survey, where we are in relation to that, and clearly this report provides a different picture. So if members are interested, we have updated information, for example, in terms of Appendix B, which is the compliance information. We're happy to take any questions you might have.
Thank you for that rapid summary, I should say. That is helpful. It's helpful also to get the reassurance on the things which are minor slippage. It's almost minor slippage is also more alarming than when you see, terribly going wrong, big red block, because it's just a bit vague. So I guess in future it'd be helpful just to have a bit of commentary around minor slippage so that we don't panic. Councillor Horrell, I think you had a question.
Exactly my point, please, Chair, that if you could annotate minor slippage, because we don't know just exactly what we're expecting there, and you're just going to get a whole series of questions from us where you've been able to explain where we are and where we're heading. That's always much better, and given the significance of this report, I think that is appropriate at this stage. Thank you.
Councillor Power, was that a point? No? Okay. Any other questions from members? Councillor Cutler?
Just more of a comment. Mr. Hendy mentioned about it being raised at various committees. The governance process was raised at the Audit and Governance because this arose as part of the annual governance report, and I think I was able to reassure the committee that a very robust governance process is in place, i.e. this regular report to this this committee and also your regular meetings with the monthly meetings with the social housing regulator. So I think that was clarified, but I just thought for clarification I should mention it.
Thank you. I think Mr. Tate, you want to speak on this. Would like to do that now?
Thanks again to be able to speak. This is an interesting paper, but I find it quite wordy, and I'm sure I understand what it's trying to get over, but I have to wonder whether, and it's an important document for tenants, whether actually they understand what that process is and what they'll get from it. There's some significant costs, administrative costs associated with that, which is coming out of the HRA. So it is tenants' money. Picking on certain points of it, in Appendix A, the Housing Improvement Plan, under Governance and Assurance, the recommendation to compliance awareness session, the leadership team, board and key individuals of the City Council should undertake a detailed property compliance training session to gain a more thorough understanding of the compliance obligations and how to provide more effective oversight, scrutiny and challenge of the compliance performance. The proposed training date for the in-person training, leadership training, the 4th of July, awaiting confirmation of an evening training session for members, TACT board. And so I sort of asked the question, trying to actually possibly put someone like myself in that position. What are the qualifications of the TACT board to take on this responsibility if they don't have the relevant experience? Is that a weakness in this element of the process of the improvement plan? And I've just put here in conclusion, even though I feel I understand this paper, something which is so important, has it been effectively cascaded to the council tenants who fundamentally this is what it's all about, delivering that better service? And there were weaknesses, albeit highlighted by housing officers. And so I just question whether perhaps there could be a little bit more simplification and readability in it to make it a more powerful document for our tenants and possibly for officers as well and members. Thank you.
Thank you for that. I think we can always make them more readable. We've talked quite a lot this morning about readability and the like. I attended the compliance awareness session myself. I was pleased that I think we had 18 members of council were on that session, which for me is a record, certainly for a late evening session. The officers, of course, were on as well. Mr. Hendy stayed until very late, which was appreciated. In terms of the qualification for the TACT board, I think absolutely they are qualified for this. I think that we've also made the training available if required. And I mentioned before, there is a recruitment process for members of TACT board. I also asked TACT board directly last week around whether this report, although important to us and important to our governance and important to social housing regulator, whether it actually is a useful document for the board, because there's a lot of in here which we need to do because it's the law, frankly, but which actually doesn't really tell you very much about the state of our housing stock. So I've given the TACT board a challenge to come back and with some suggestions for the kind of the really important things to, I kind of hate the jargon, but leading indicators, the things that really, really matter and they really want to see, while we will keep doing this because that's what the regulator requires. So hopefully that answers your questions. And again, thank you as usual for coming along. Do we have any? Oh, Councillor Howell.
Chair, just an explanation so that we're all clear on how we're using this report. So if I look at fire safety towards the end of the report, and item 11, for example, it says full M&E review of the fire alarm system across HRA stock with the officer responsible and the date of March 26. And it says will require specialist resource to complete this activity. My assumption, therefore, is that, and indeed on the one above 10, identified new action to track through service improvement due on the June 25 to ensure all data is visible, and held within systems. So on 10, for example, do we know that that has been actioned? It says on track, but it's June 25. On the next one, obviously, I'm assuming it stays there until we're completed. But on 10, I don't know whether that will be complete, is complete, or it's actually going to be delayed because we still haven't ensured all the data is visible on the system. So sorry, a sort of detailed question, but to make sure we understand what we're reading here and what we should expect for future analysis. Thank you.
Ms. Hobbs?
Thank you for the question and comments. So I'm looking at the updated plan just to give you an update on progress as well. So on number 10, there is some ongoing work. So we've recorded that as minor slippage. So our data validation and reconciliation is continuing with that one. What we have done since that report's been released is we've strengthened our compliance structure. So we've now got a building safety manager in who is overseeing a lot of this work, and we've kind of reviewed that process. So we've also as of this week got a fire safety coordinator in. Again, we recognised and we'd reported previously to our PAC board that whilst we had those gaps, trying to get to all this important work, was proving challenging. So that's an ongoing one. On number 11, the full mechanical and electrical review, whilst this plan originally was Pennington's and is largely from the compliance health check, as the teams are working through things and identifying other work, we're adding that onto the plan for full transparency and highlighting it as new. So that is something, once the structure settles down and other kind of key priorities have been identified, that they will get to as part of the data. On the systems, I know you mentioned that, we are in the process of procuring True Compliance, a system which will hold all of our compliance programme data. It's going to significantly reduce manual intervention in our off-system working, where we're reliant on getting contractor information, translating that into another spreadsheet, and there's always risk of error. So we hope for that to be implemented in the autumn, but until we're fully in contract and can scope, we won't know. But that will give dashboard viewing, it will read certificates, read all of the data, as I say, and then there'll be an assurance layer on top from an independent team within housing services to look at that.
Thank you.
That's really helpful. I think also just at a much more kind of basic level, just making sure that the colours and the commentary is clear on the report, which we've already talked about, I think would also be really helpful. Just so that when we say on track, we kind of know what that means. Councillor Power.
I find this amount of detail immensely reassuring, and it does actually demonstrate how much work has had to be done to get this work moving along briskly. I think we've all worked on projects where a minor detail was overlooked and it upset the whole ship. So please keep on with this level of reporting. I find it very easy to understand, and I think we should all have it in the public domain as much as possible. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. If there are no further comments, I'm going to look at my Cabinet colleagues to refer them to the recommendations on page 151. The first is to note the progress. We've done that. The second, though, is to agree to receive regular updates on planned implementation of future meetings, building in Councillor Horrell's comments about the best way to do that. Is that agreed? Thank you. And thank you. Which I think just leaves the last agenda item, which is the next meeting, which is as in your agenda pack. So with that, I think we're done. And thank you. Just go over 2 hours, but it was a good meeting. Thank you, everyone, for your contributions.